All right, let's dive into an incredible story. It's an ancient one from the book of Joshua, but you're going to see it has a lesson that is surprisingly, well, modern. It's all about how fast a simple misunderstanding can spiral into a total catastrophe and how communication, thankfully, can pull us right back from the brink.
So how does that happen really? How can one single event, one object, be so misinterpreted that brothers, who are literally just fighting a war side by side, are suddenly ready to turn their swords on each other? That is the question at the very heart of this story.
To really get the conflict, we have to start with the peace that came just before it. So let's set the scene. The Israelite tribes, after a long, hard fight, have finally conquered the land of Canaan.
Can you just imagine the relief? All those years of fighting are finally over. The land's been divided up. But for a few of the tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, this moment is kind of bittersweet. See, they kept their promise to fight, but their homes, their land, was way over on the other side of the Jordan River. It was time for them to say goodbye.
You know, their whole journey started years before this when they crossed that river to help out their brothers. Now, victory's in the bag, and their leader, Joshua, he blesses them for being so faithful and sends them on their way home. There's this real sense of unity, of a job well done. But that little bit of geography, that Jordan River, it's about to become a huge, huge problem.
So, as they're heading home, these eastern tribes, they do something. Something that lights the fuse for this whole crisis. They build a structure, and it's a very big, very noticeable, and, as it turns out, a deeply misunderstood structure.
The text is really clear on this. This was not just some little pile of rocks. It was a great, impressive altar. It was built to be seen, and oh, it was seen all right, but it was not understood. And right there, in that gap between seeing and understanding, that's where the crisis was born.
And here it is. This is the massive gulf between perception and reality. The Western tribes see this altar, and their minds immediately go to the worst-case scenario. This is rebellion. This is idolatry. It's treason, an act designed to tear the nation apart. But the Eastern tribes' real intention, it was the exact opposite. They didn't build it for separation. They built it for remembrance, to make sure their kids and their kids' kids would never be seen as separate from the rest of Israel.
So why such an extreme reaction? I mean, why jump straight to treason? Well, because their history was just filled with these painful warnings. They had a specific law that said there was only one place for sacrifice. They had this painful memory of a guy named Achan, where his one sin brought defeat to their entire army. So in their minds, this new altar could bring God's punishment down on everybody, not just the tribes who built it. Their fear, it was real, and it was rooted in some pretty traumatic, shared memories.
And that fear? Well, it turned to outrage pretty quick, and that outrage turned into mobilization. Just like that, a nation that was celebrating peace just a few days earlier was now gearing up for a civil war.
10 of the 12 tribes raised an army. They were ready to march against their own brothers, the 2.5 tribes on the other side of the river. I mean, the whole situation had just escalated with terrifying speed.
A group, led by the priest Phinehas, who was known for being, let's say, pretty zealous, went to confront them, and their opening line, it wasn't a question, it was a straight-up accusation. What is this breach of faith? You can just hear it. They had already made up their minds.
They were so sure that their brothers had sinned, they actually made them an offer. They said, hey, abandon your unclean land and come back over to our side of the river where you can be righteous. It shows you they weren't just angry. They were desperately trying to stop what they saw as a national disaster, even if it meant totally redrawing the map.
Seriously, just put yourself in their shoes for a second. You've just done something you think is meant to preserve unity, and now you're being called a traitor. An army of your own people is about to attack you. Your first instinct, it might be anger, right? Or defensiveness, or just pure fear. What do you do?
So this right here is the turning point. The entire story, war or peace, it all comes down to how the accused tribes choose to answer this charge. And here we see this crucial choice. They didn't fight fire with fire. They didn't meet the accusation with another accusation. They didn't meet the threat of swords with their own swords. Instead, they chose to de-escalate. They chose to explain. And honestly, this decision saved the nation.
Their response was just a masterclass in how to handle conflict. First, they appealed to God, who was the only one who really knew their hearts. Then, they flat out denied the charge. No ifs, ands, or buts. But then they did something absolutely brilliant. They explained their fear. They told them, "We were worried that one day your kids would look at the Jordan River and tell our kids, you have no part in our nation."
So the altar was never, ever meant for sacrifice. It was a copy, a replica, a memorial. Its whole purpose was to be a witness, to stand there forever as a physical reminder that the people on both sides of that river were one nation serving one God. The very thing they were accused of trying to destroy, unity, was the one thing they were desperately trying to protect.
So the truth is out, the anger just melts away, and the war is called off. But the story leaves us with some really powerful lessons for how we can navigate our own misunderstandings today.
You can just feel the relief in these words. Once the explanation was actually heard, the Western tribes were satisfied. All the talk of war just vanished, instantly, and it was replaced with blessings to God. A single conversation changed absolutely everything.
So what are the takeaways for us? Well, it boils down to 4 simple but pretty powerful steps. 1. Check your assumptions before you act. 2. Really truly listen before you leap to conclusions. 3. If you're the one being accused, try to respond with grace, not just pure defensiveness. And finally, number 4, you got to recognize that even our best intentions can sometimes be completely misread by other people.
You know, this ancient proverb just perfectly captures the turning point of this story, doesn't it? The Eastern tribes offered that soft answer, that careful explanation, and it turned away the wrath of an entire army. A harsh word back? Yeah, that would have almost certainly led to bloodshed.
And this really gets to the heart of it. It's about the power of our character in these moments. The conflict wasn't just solved by a good explanation, it was solved by the gentle and patient spirit with which that explanation was delivered. That's the kind of spirit that can truly heal a divide.
And so that leaves us with this final question to think about. An army was literally ready to march. A nation was about to break apart, all from a misunderstanding. And it was all solved by one honest conversation. So what altar of misunderstanding exists in your world right now? And what might change if you chose to explain with grace, or maybe just listen with a little more patience?